Last year when we moved house, we had the option to either rent or buy, and contrary to conventional wisdom, decided that it was better for us to rent rather than buy. In this video, I'm going to talk you through why conventional wisdom isn't always that wise, and why for some people, including me, it was definitely the right call to rent rather than buy. Hello folks, my name's Kevin Chapman. I'm a former financial advisor who specialised in mortgages, protection and house moving, often within a estate agency for the first 9 years of my professional career. And in this video, I'm going to be telling you why buying a house might not be a very good idea. If my old bosses could see me now, they'd be absolutely furious. But I'm now 38 years old and I've never actually owned a house, despite, like I say, being involved in the buying and selling of them for half of my working life. There's got to be a reason for that, hasn't there? And I'm going to explain that reason for you in just a second. If you're excited to find out what the reasons are, though, please make sure you leave a nice big thumbs up on the video. It is the most helpful and supportive thing you could do to help the channel out, help the video out. It really does spark off the YouTube algorithm. And while you're down there, if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the channel, turn your notifications on as well, all that good stuff, it all helps. But the big thing is, let's have a like, please. I would love a like, because I'm going to talk you through some stuff that probably you might not have heard before, because it, like I said in the intro, it does go against conventional wisdom. And I'm going to do it by using our own house move as a case study, and by showing you that it was right for us to rent, will hopefully show you that it might sometimes be the right decision to rent a house rather than buying one. Now, if we're going to do a video like this, the starting point I have to go with is the thing that I know is it's already been posted in the comments. It's definitely already down there. The people who've just seen the title of the video and the thumbnail and have decided to come in and tell me why I'm wrong, it will be down there probably multiple times. Renting is just throwing money away. Okay. We're gonna deal with this whole renting is just throwing money away thing, and actually do a comparison between how much it would cost us to rent this house for the time we expect to be here, compared to how much it would have cost us to buy this house, pay a mortgage on it while we're here, and then sell it when we move on to go somewhere else. And I think it is important to know the context of our house move. We moved here because Anna had finished university. She'd started a new job in a new area. We had to move to the new area so she could start the new job, but we didn't know anything about the job because she was fresh out of university, and we didn't know anything about the area. We'd been here like once on a day out, but didn't know anything about the local area, didn't know what was good or bad, didn't really know where we were looking. So we were going in completely blind in the middle of a global pandemic, where we didn't really have the option to drive around the area, looking at loads and loads of houses, getting a feel for what the local area is like, because everyone was stuck in their houses. We did like 3 or 4 viewings. That was that. And because of all that, we made a decision fairly early on that this house move was going to be a short-term house move. And the short term that we had in mind is we're probably looking at a 2-year stay at this house. And it's 2 years for a lot of reasons. Like I say, it's a new job. It's a new area. We didn't know when we moved in if Anna was going to like the job. We didn't know if we were going to like the area or not. So we needed a get out clause. We needed a time frame to put on it to make a decision. Do we like it, or do we want to go somewhere else? Do we want to go back where we came from? But also 2 years ties in quite nicely to a lot of family milestones as well. 2 years brings us roughly to the end of Lucy's time at university. So she's probably going to be looking to get a place of her own at that point. It also ties in with when Andy will likely be moving out and going into whatever kind of assisted living situation he ends up in once he's finished in school and moves out of home. It will take Amy beyond her GCSEs and into whatever post-16 education provision she decides to do. She'll be very close to going off to university herself. And me and Anna will definitely be at the point where our criteria for what makes a house that's right for us is going to change massively in 2 years. We're going to go from needing a big house with lots of bedrooms to fit all these children in to actually we just need somewhere that's big enough for us, big enough for me to work, and has the option for the kids to come and stay short term as and when they want to, but we don't need to have a big 4-bedroom house to fit all the kids in for the next 10 years of our lives, because our kids are 19, 17, 15 this year. Got to get their ages right. They're all practically adults. We don't need to be thinking in terms of having somewhere for our kids to grow up in. They've already done that. So everything was pointing towards we need to do something that's going to cover us for the next couple of years and then regroup and replan in 2 years' time. So because of that, the figures that I'm going to be showing in this video are based on 2 years of renting compared to 2 years of buying and owning a house, and crucially then selling it and moving on, because I'm fairly confident we probably are going to leave this area in 2 years' time, because you know, that's roughly how long it takes a graduate going into their first job to decide it's time to move on into whatever the next step in their career is. We've been talking for a long time about wanting to get closer to London, and we've kind of moved horizontally across the country. We're no closer to London than we were before, which really doesn't help out with my work. So I think 2 years, regardless of whether we rented or bought, we would be leaving this area behind. So we're looking at 2 years of renting compared to 2 years of owning, and we are going to run the numbers, and we're going to start with renting so that we can figure out just how much money we're throwing away. And because we're working this based on our house, we're going to run the real numbers. So the house that we live in now, we pay £770 a month in rent. We paid a £225 application fee, and there was a deposit of 1.5 months rent, which is somewhere in the low £1,000 range. I'm not including the deposit within that because we get the deposit back at the end of the 2 years. Yes, you could make an argument, well, you're not earning interest on it for those 2 years. For the purposes of this, the interest we'd earn on £1,000 in 2 years is negligible, so I'm going to kind of ignore it. I'm pretty close to just ignoring the 200-ish pounds for the application fee as well, but it's within the calculation somewhere. But we're really just focusing on the rent, because the rent is what traditionally is viewed by people as the lost money. £770 a month over 2 years works out at £18,480. Add on the application fee as well, and our total cost for living in this house rented for 2 years is £18,705. So that's the amount of money that we're throwing away by renting it for 2 years. So theoretically, if we buy the house, we're better off than that, right? Right? Shall we have a look? So, of course, I've done some research based on how much this house was bought for when our current landlord bought it a few years ago, how much it was bought for 10 years previous to that, how much similar houses in the area go for. And the valuation that I've come to through a little bit of internet research is that this house is worth £185,500. Now, we didn't actually have the option to buy this specific house, but there's plenty of similar stuff nearby that we could have bought for a similar sort of house and a similar sort of price range. So for the ease of this comparison, we'll do it based on this house. So this house would have cost us £180,500, which with a 10% deposit means we would have put down £18,550 as a deposit, meaning we would need a mortgage of £166,950, which, as with most mortgages, we probably would have taken over a 25-year term. We could have done it over a 30-year term. I'm still just young enough to be able to get a 30-year term, but we probably would have done 25 years. Now, based on a quick Google search, as first-time buyers, buying a 90% loan to value and borrowing £166,950, we could get this mortgage deal, which is a 3.09% fixed rate for 28 months. It's as near to 2 years fixed as I could get, but already illustrates some of the difficulties around buying rather than renting, because straight away we're tied in for 28 months rather than 24. So we're staying for 2 years, 4 months, because if we pay the mortgage off early to be able to move on to somewhere else, we either have to pay an early redemption fee to get out of our fixed rate contract, or we have to take this mortgage with us and top up when we go somewhere else, and it becomes a whole complicated thing. So straight away, we're losing a little bit of flexibility by buying. We can't just do 2 years the way we did on our tenancy agreement. So it's a 2-year fixed rate of 3.09%, setup fees on this of £1,199, which is a £999 product fee and a £200 valuation fee, which would give us a monthly payment of £799 a month during our 2-year fixed period. And then beyond that, it goes up to £839 on this mortgage lender's standard variable rate, which, as the name indicates, it's variable. It could go up or down depending on what happens with interest rates. My gut feeling is interest rates can't go any lower than they are now. So probably at the end of the 2 years, there would be a bigger jump than that £839. But obviously we could do a new fix. We could remortgage, bring that down onto a new fixed rate again for X amount of time. But by doing that, there's then going to be more arrangement fees and all that kind of stuff. So more costs involved. Plus, of course, that assumes we stay here, and we're working on the assumption that we're 2 years and then we're gone. So we don't really need to worry too much about what happens beyond the 2-year fixed rate, other than the fact that there's always the possibility when you own a house that you can't sell it, or you can't sell it for the amount that you want to. So we're assuming at the end of the 2 years we're able to sell. There needs to be a big asterisk next to that, because there's always the possibility that you can't sell, or possibly more importantly, can't sell for the price that you need or want to be able to sell at to cover your mortgage, or cover your mortgage plus your moving costs and your sale costs and all that kind of thing. So that's something to bear in mind. But for the purposes of this, we're assuming we're able to sell it in reasonable amount of time for at least what we paid for it. I think that's a fair assumption to make. So based just on those figures that we've got so far, we know that renting would have cost us £18,705 over 2 years. Buying, based on that mortgage, is going to cost us £19,176 just in the monthly mortgage payments. And then, of course, we've got the arrangement fees on that as well, which brings the total costs so far to £20,375, which is a difference between the mortgage and the renting of £1,670. But Kev, that's not a fair comparison, because when you're paying off a mortgage, you're reducing the amount you owe every month. Completely agree. You shouldn't do that comparison, because it's not a fair way to compare renting against buying, because as the comments section has rightly pointed out, you are reducing the amount that you owe each time you make a monthly mortgage payment. Not by as much as you think, because the interest on a mortgage is front loaded. So particularly in those early years, far more of your monthly payment is interest than capital. So after a couple of years, you'd be surprised by how little of that mortgage you'll have actually paid off. But we're going to be completely fair. We're going to work out exactly how much of the mortgage we would have paid off and redo those calculations. So in 2 years, we should have paid out of those £20,375 worth of costs, £9,139 of that should have come off the mortgage balance, which means that our actual cost over 2 years for owning is £11,236, right? Right? That's much less than renting. It is, but it's still not the true number, because in addition to the fees that the lender charges you, there are other fees to consider as well. Firstly, stamp duty. Now, I know at the time this video is being made, we are currently in a period of a stamp duty holiday for low value properties in the UK because of the pandemic, but that may or may not be all about to change. We don't know until the budget comes out next week, but even if the holiday is extended, it's not really something we can base on for the long term. So let's assume stamp duty is there. So stamp duty on a house of this value would be 2% of the purchase price of everything over £125,000, which would come in at £1,209.98. So that's an extra fee that we usually have to pay, even though we can kind of get around paying it at the moment. Trying to make this video valuable in the long term. We're also going to need a survey. But you've already paid for a valuation as part of the mortgage, Kev. Yes, but all a valuation for mortgage does is it tells the lender that your house is worth the amount that you're paying it, so they can feel safe to lend you money based on that value. It doesn't actually offer you anything as a purchaser, and unless you're buying a brand new house that's covered in warranties and guarantees, you're going to want to have that house surveyed. You're going to want to make sure the roof isn't leaking, the place isn't sinking, the boiler's not about to blow up, the electricity all works and it's not going to catch fire the first time you turn on a light. You want to have it surveyed. So in addition to your valuation, you need a survey. A survey is going to be another £500 or so, depending on the value of the house. You've then got your solicitors or conveyancing fees as well. There's lots of the legal work that you can't do yourself. You have to appoint a solicitor or a conveyancer to do that work for you. Again, this can vary depending on how cheap and cheerful you want to go, and whether you're getting someone you find on the internet or the family solicitor from down the road, and it will vary a little bit according to the value of the property as well. But I think it's a fairly safe rule of thumb for this kind of purchase to assume about £1,000 in conveyancing fees for buying a house. Plus, you've then got the land registry fee as well, which is another £200. And all of a sudden, what was originally £1,199 in upfront fees that we were just paying to the mortgage lender has turned into £4,308.98, which means that our actual cost of having a mortgage is now £13,447.98 over 2 years. Or is it? Because it's still not quite. There's still more stuff that we need to add into this. Remember, we put down that deposit of 10%, that deposit of £18,500. Well, there's an opportunity cost attached to tying that deposit up in the value of your home, because traditionally house prices have risen at a slower rate than stock market prices. And if you're investing that £18,500 as a house deposit into your home, it then means you can't invest that same £18,500 into the stock market. Stock market returns traditionally could be anywhere between 8 and 12%, depending on how smartly invested it is and what kind of funds you're putting it into, what the fees attached to it are. Whereas house price rises traditionally 3 to 4% per year. To me, the difference between those two means you've got an opportunity cost each year of something in the region of about £2,000. The simple way of explaining what I mean there is every year your house deposit is in your house rather than invested, it's costing you about £2,000 a year in lost interest. It's not quite as simple as that, especially when you factor in the fact it's not interest, it's capital gains and dividends, and also compound interest is a thing the longer it's in there for you for as well. But over the course of 2 years, we can kind of disregard compounding and just work on the basis that over the course of those couple of years, it's going to be about £2,000 a year in lost interest by it not being in the stock market, by it instead being in your house. So we can add that onto our amount as well. So what was £13,500 is now actually something a lot closer to the region of £17,500. We've started to drop some of the accuracy because we're dealing with not quite sure how accurate these numbers are now, but we can now assume we're looking at about £17,500 of the cost of owning your house. But that is still less than renting, so we're still winning, right? Surely this time. No, we're not, because there's other costs associated with owning a house. One of the major differences between owning a house and renting a house is when you rent a house, if your boiler blows up or your roof falls off, your landlord sorts it and it doesn't cost you anything. When you own your own house, you're responsible for all the maintenance and repairs on your own house. Doing a quick bit of Googling on this, the general advice is a rough rule of thumb is to allow about 1% of the purchase price of the house per year that you live in the property to go towards your repairs and maintenance. And that's going to cover your minimum day-to-day stuff. So just if we're doing that, we're looking at £1,855 per year, which just by adding that on brings our total up to £21,200 for our 2 years living in this house, which is now already more expensive than renting. But that's not necessarily where you'll stop with repairs and maintenance, because how many times does somebody move into a new house and this house is perfect, but it does need a new kitchen or a new bathroom or some new carpets or a new this, that, or the other. It is so rare for somebody to move into a house, especially one that's not brand new, to move into a house that they don't feel the immediate need to do something to. So you potentially are going to add an extra cost on top of all of this as well for that new kitchen, that new bathroom. If you move into a house, do a new kitchen, new bathroom, decorate throughout and have your garden landscaped, that could easily be another £20,000 that you wouldn't have spent if you were renting. Now, I'm excluding that from the calculations because I think it's unfair to include it because it's not a like-for-like thing. So you can't do that when you move into a rented property. But when you own the place, you have that emotional attachment and you're much more likely to spend money that you wouldn't have spent if you were renting. So it's something to bear in mind. If you're going to have to do the kitchen, you're going to have to pay to do the kitchen, and that all comes into that costs. If you move into a ropey old rented house with a dodgy kitchen that needs replacing, the landlord replaces it. It might not be to your specification, but it's still a new kitchen. So we're now at the point where our cost of having a mortgage, our cost of buying, is more expensive than 2 years of renting. Surely you've made your point now, Kev. I get it. Owning a house is more expensive than renting in the short term. We're still not quite done, because the last thing that we have to take into account is that at the end of our 2 years of living there, we've then got to sell it and buy somewhere else. Now, selling a house costs money. You have to pay your estate agent. There are varying amounts that you could pay. You could list it yourself onto Rightmove and go it alone and probably not pay very much at all, or get a private seller, not pay very much at all. There are these places where you could pay £1,000 upfront fee and then just let them do their thing from the magic of a call centre hidden away on the internet. Or you could do it the traditional way and appoint a local estate agent who then tends to take a percentage of the price of the house when it's sold. But that percentage can be anywhere between 1.5% and 2.5% of the price. So if we were to assume, let's say, a 2% estate agency fee for selling the house, and we're assuming the house price hasn't gone up in value, that's nearly £4,000 in estate agency fees. And obviously if the house price has increased, that fee goes up and up and up. So what was £21,000 is now up to £24,000 because we've got to sell the house. And then, of course, you've got to buy the next one as well. And then you're caught back into that original sort of £4,500 of upfront fees again. Whereas when you move from one rented property to the next, you get your first deposit back, you pay your new deposit, but you know you're getting that back, so you don't worry about it. Yeah, you might have to pay another £200 arrangement fee, but you're not going to have to pay another £4,000 in upfront costs. But when you factor in the cost of selling this place and then buying the next place, what was £21,000 over 2 and a bit years can now be pushing £30,000 over 2 and a bit years. And that's without factoring in your new kitchen, your new bathroom, whatever else that you might want. And now we've seen that even with the increase in the value of the property, you're actually still spending £12,000 more over 2 years by owning when compared to renting. So yeah, you've got this asset that's increased in value, but actually you've wasted £500 a month over the course of your 2 years just so that you can have your asset that's increased in value. By being there only 2 years, it's actually lost. And that's the kind of maths that you need to go through when you're deciding whether you want to rent or you want to buy. Now, the good news is if you're going to be in it for more of the long term, the longer you stay at the house, obviously, the less of an impact those upfront fees and things like that have. You can counter that with, well, then the more likely you are to have to do significant repairs. But then you can counter the counter by saying, yeah, but the more likely it is to have increased in value. But then the more likely your stock market lost opportunity cost is likely to have gone up as well. And it starts to look a much safer bet in the longer term, but also the numbers get much, much more guessworky. So I'm not going to show you numbers for 10, 15, 20 years down the line, but it is fairly safe to assume with some pretty wide margins of error, if you're going to be in a house 10 years plus, then you're definitely better off financially by owning that house. If you're going to be there 5 years or less, though, there's a very strong argument that you're probably better off renting. So my advice that's not really advice, because this is a video for entertainment purposes only, and that disclaimer has finally made it into the video, which is good. My advice that's not advice, my advice to myself would be, unless I was absolutely sure I was going to live in a house for 5 years or more, I would not buy it because I'll be financially better off by renting. Never mind the fact that I have much more flexibility to move when I want, to not be reliant on someone else buying my house, to not be tied in with things like redemption fees and unexpected house repairs, the boiler blowing in the middle of the night and me having to pay for it. I get more flexibility, more peace of mind. I even only have to pay for contents insurance rather than buildings and contents. In the short term, you're almost always going to be better off renting. If you get into the long term, obviously you are going to be better owning because the value of the house is going to increase and all that kind of good stuff. But I strongly urge you, if you are considering buying a house in the near future, to have this think. How long are you likely to live in there for? Are you moving in with your partner? Are you newly married? Have you got kids? Have you got kids on the way? What's your career situation like? Are you likely to have a career change in the near future? Are you likely to have to move house for work? If you can't confidently say when you're moving into your new house, I am definitely going to live here for at least 5 years, preferably 10 years, then I would argue that you might be better off renting and investing the difference, investing all that money that you'd saved, because that £12,000 that we talked about costing you more on a mortgage compared to renting, if you were to invest that with your existing £18,000 of deposit that we talked about before, pretty soon you're building up quite the lump sum of money that when it does come time to buy, you can actually put down a larger deposit. It's then lower risk, it's lower cost. You're able to get a better mortgage rate. And I'm 38 and I have no issue at all. I'm in no rush to buy a house still. I know I will one day. Realistically, I probably will sometime in my mid-40s. We'll buy a house. By that point, we'll be in a situation to put down a massive deposit on the house. It's going to be very, very low risk, and we'll buy somewhere that's just right for me and Anna with with maybe a guest room that doubles as an office. And it'll be such a low monthly payment because of the size of the deposit we put down. We can get that thing paid off within 10 years probably and be no further behind by the time we're closing in on retirement age than the people who bought in their 20s and constantly were climbing the ladder, but wondering why it was taking them so long because they were constantly adding on all these new fees from estate agency fees and stamp duty and arrangement fees and survey fees and all these things attached with moving house. So all I'm asking is you do the sums. Let me know down in the comments whether you are convinced or not. Do you think we were right to rent? Should we have bought? I mean, I know 100% know that we were right to rent. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts after hearing this entire video. If you still think we should have bought a house last year, what do you think we should do in a couple of years? What would you do? Love to get a conversation going down in the comments section. And while you're down there, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn your notifications on, and let me know what video you'd like to see me make next week, because as part of this new content push we've got on the channel at the moment, I'm kind of going with what you asked for. This is a video that was suggested by a few people last week, and it won the community page poll. I'll take the suggestions from this week, along with the losing suggestions from last week, put them in another poll, and whichever one wins will be the video you see this time next week. Thanks very much for watching, folks.